We've had a long-standing partnership, which we're very grateful for here at the Shot Tower. Roy is a nonprofit gallery, and we show the work of emerging artists. It's a juried space, and so artists apply to be there. We've just concluded our jurying for 2023 and slated our shows. I'm very excited about that. We also offer internships, and there's some success stories in the audience also. And hopefully you'll find a place for yourself or your work at Roy also. Today we're just going to have a discussion with the artists who are participating both online through Zoom and here in person. So be thinking about questions that you might have for them. This year, ImageOhio is a juried exhibition of lens-based work. And this year we partnered with Photo Focus from Cincinnati. It's a lens-based institution in Cincinnati, and every 2 years they have something called a biennial. This is the year for that biennial. And so we are at one of 5 sites in Columbus as part of that biennial celebration. So we actually moved our ImageOhio exhibition from February, when it typically takes place, to October in order to take advantage of that. And we developed partnerships with the Wexner Center and the museum and CCAD, and an exhibition space in Franklinton called 400. And so we're very excited that the work of these artists will get in front of a whole new audience. And later today we'll have, as Teresa mentioned, a tour coming here about 2:30. So by that time you'll be heading out to your next appointment or class or home, I'm not sure. And then those visitors will join us as well. So today we just want to have a conversation and maybe talk a little bit about the artists and their work. We've already gone into somewhat in the catalog, the artists and their process with regard to the theme. This year's theme was a changing world, and so artists created artwork to reflect that theme. Before we get started, I do need to take a moment to thank the sponsors who make things like this possible. Ohio Arts Council, Greater Columbus Arts Council, the Columbus Foundation, and of course, Photo Focus. So I think we'll just go down the line. Tracy's first, because they're nearest to me. And then just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your work and maybe your process if you feel comfortable with that. We're wiping off our microphones in between people because we have to hold it very close to our faces. So I'm going to be respectful of that.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Tracy Schotten. My work exists on the brick walls on the far side of the gallery over there. You'll see it's sort of a, the pieces are called inchoative aspects. The title refers to a tense in linguistics that's about like becoming. So in English, we don't really have that exact tense, but we can understand it as something that's becoming in process. And my practice is an expanded lens practice. So I work both in video and photography in the darkroom and installation and with glass object making. And so the works on view here today are, they're actually gelatin photograms. So they don't include negatives. They are not images I went out and photographed in the world. They are cameraless images that are created in the darkroom. And yeah, I think with these pieces, I was really excited to print large and utilize a lot of negative space. So a lot of that black surrounding space. And I'm really curious about the space beyond the picture plane and what an image can evoke beyond its representational qualities. Is that enough? That's what I got.
Hi, are you guys in one class or multiple classes, or I just wonder where you're three classes and make classes where you make things and you have to think about content and form, right? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Gallery interns. Some are the gallery interns and some are advanced placement art students. Okay. It's good to know where you're coming from as well as where we're coming from. And I'm sure that we all have different practices, but one of the hardest things for my students, I teach at Kenyon College up the road, is to think about how to come up with a good idea. Is that a hard thing to do? I think sometimes that's a hard thing to do. And one of the ways that I like to do that is to collaborate with someone else. And it can be a musician, a dancer, a scientist, a writer. All of those things have really helped me in my practice. And so that might be a thought for you to see how bouncing off your ideas off someone else can help develop that change. I assume you're a little bit familiar with the pieces because we're sitting here not necessarily in front of the pieces, but if you look over my shoulder, you'll see mine, which is the glowing boxes back there. And they're actually not video, even though they look a little like video, but they riff off of time. And that's because I actually do a lot of video and installation. And they are a series of still images that if you move to the left or move to the right, it gives a little bit of a notion of time. So time is one of the things that changes, but also the topic, right? Here you have somebody in the snow with a kayak and a jacket on, right? A life jacket. And the title is The Snow Migrant. Obviously, it's probably true that people don't necessarily want to migrate to a snowy place right away, although I'm sure some people do. But it's a bit more of a metaphor that the idea of coming across in a difficult, arduous way to a new place, and a place that also is in danger and fragile. One of the pieces that this goes with is an image that relates to Antarctica, which I was able to go close to, although not exactly there. I flew over Cape Horn one time. And so that's been in my mind for a long time, how Antarctica is sort of melting away and falling away. So trying to piece those things together, the collaboration, the idea of climate change, the idea of how pulling together things that don't necessarily seem to go, but how do they bounce off of each other and develop a new concept?
Any good either? Oh, we have a garbage box even. Yay. Hi, I'm Ardeen Nelson, and I'm a retired teacher who taught for a long time at Ohio State, photo, computer, lens-based sorts of things. And over a period of time, my work's kind of evolved, and what's here today on the brick wall over there is the latest iteration of what I'm up to. Have I ever photographed people? Yes, but that's not where I tend to go all the time. I've been into landscape, urban landscape, Southwest landscape, things, well, various places. I was able to travel to Germany and let me back up. I grew up in Chicago, but every summer got shipped off to my grandparents' farm in the middle of North Dakota. So I was used to gardens, flowers, vegetables, canning, etc. for the winter, all of that. So it was great growing up in both those worlds. Jump forward. So I'm an image maker, and I tend to work with landscape in a whole variety of formats. My largest pinhole camera shoots 20 by 24 film. And so they're contact prints. They're smaller than that, but they're contact prints. And Diana plastic camera. I've done a lot of work with that. So a wide variety, digital cameras, view cameras, large format, small format, all sorts of things. So the landscape moved into more landscape and between the city and being in the country. But I had the opportunity to make several trips to Germany And what I found over there was something called Schraber Gardens, which are not like our community gardens at all, but it let me be in a garden. And there are certain rules over there about what the gardens have to be: 1/3 grass, 1/3 vegetables, 1/3 flowers. And I suddenly sort of got the idea of why there were these two huge gardens on the farm, one with vegetables and one with flowers. There's German history in the family. So, well, okay, so that was, trying to think now, like 10, 12, 14 years ago. After that, I started moving into other things here around Columbus, and I ended up shooting, shouldn't say shooting, photographing at the Museum of Biological Diversity at Ohio State. I don't know if you've ever been there. They only have an open house once a year, but I was able to go into the collections and actually photograph specimens that are in the collections. And some of the things, well, everything I was photographing are, yeah, dead animals. But normally they're moving, whether it's fish or birds or butterflies, they're usually moving and you really don't get to study them. But by looking at the specimens and making those photographs, you could really study them. Okay, so I'm moving along here. COVID hits. Everything shuts down. I can't go there. But the one thing I have in my garden is lots of flowers. So I ended up looking at my flowers, and I was looking at the process past their prime as they start to grow mold and dry up and lose their color. And that made me think about the aging process. I don't know for sure, but I'm probably, if not the oldest, nearly the oldest person up here. And that's a process that I think about these days, what it's like to get older and what you can and can't do. And what about how you look when you get older? Well, my flowers. That's how I got to them. And I'm isolating them against black because rather than having this beautiful environment for them to be in, they become specimens again. A sampling, a document of the process. And some flowers I've actually been able to follow over a period of time, which is really interesting to me to do. Anyway, that's enough.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kayla Holdgrave. I have the installation, the large piece, the black and white image with the 3 images on top. As far as like my process and my work, I primarily am a landscape photographer. I work with my family's archive. So I work with like found images, but specifically images of my family. I shoot with film. I shoot small, medium, large format, work in the darkroom, but also do a lot of alternative processes. And so specifically with this piece, the larger image is from a medium format black and white negative, and I printed it on vinyl, vinyl graphic. It's like a giant sticker, essentially. It's 4 panels. And then the images on top are called anthotypes. It's a process that uses a natural, like plant-based material. This is specifically butterfly pea flower. Butterfly pea flower is a blue flower that is can be used as a tea. It's kind of like a calming tea or like an antidepressant tea. And that's what gives that blue hue. But these images won't stay permanent. They will fade and disappear over time. And the images specifically are of my great grandmother, 3 different stages of her life. And this place that I photographed is a place that we both shared or had in common, but we did not share it together at the same time. So I always heard about this space and this specific place based on photographs and stories that she would tell me. but we never had the time to spend there together. So a lot of my work deals with the idea of like generational memory, specifically with spaces, but also thinking about like memories and stories through, you know, seeing these images, but also families, you know, telling you these stories. And like, you might have a memory of something based on a photograph, but then, you know, someone else tells you their memory of it and your memory alters or changes. And it's the idea of like, when you recall this memory, it's never the same as when it was first, when you like first experienced it. It changes over time. So you're remembering it from the last time you thought of it. So thinking about like, you know, are you actually remembering the same thing or not? But I like to think about those ideas a lot, and specifically with places, and again, using my family's archives as well. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I am Michal Raisin. I'm with the Life Stories Project, which is all the way on the end over there. I'm a bit of an outlier in this group because I'm not a visual artist, but I love that everyone's been bringing up stories and storytellings. I guess I would say that words are my medium. And well, I'll let Nikki also talk about this, but we did a project with the group We Amplify Voices. And it was in collaboration with Ohio Humanities. And a lot of my work, I was a professor of comparative literature for 8 years. At the time that the Life Stories Project was going on, I was actually teaching at Denison, so a sister school. And I come from a background of talking about immigrant literatures. I have not worked with incarcerated populations before, but I have spent a lot of time thinking about what kind of stories do not get told, or how do the really difficult stories, the really traumatic ones, get told. And sometimes we need special language or special format for those stories to come through. And so when we embarked on this project, we were brought in to conduct oral histories with the women. And these were women who are serving either really long or life sentences at the Ohio Reformatory for Women. And you can imagine that their stories are very, very traumatic. And it was really important to us that we get the most unfiltered version of what happened to them according to their own voices. So I'm also glad that my colleague over here mentioned collaboration, because it took a team of us to go in and work with them. So I taught them how to conduct oral histories, what are the different components of it. I prepared them to interview each other. So they all did this. And then I'll let Nikki talk about the camera crew. They were also inmates. And we did this all in collaboration. Our Waves director of digital storytelling was there to document it. The programming director is a licensed clinician, so she was there to do trauma work with them. So it was a full-fledged collaborative effort. And then what you see here in the exhibit are the actual interviews that the women conducted on each other and were filmed by women at the Ohio Reformatory for Women. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Corey Witt, and I teach photography here at Fort Hays Career Center, and here with my students today. My piece in this show is a self-portrait, which is not what I typically do. I have a lot of students who shoot self-portraits, and some of them were encouraging me years ago to do some self-portraits, and I was very inspired by them. But not and motivated at, you know, it wasn't the right time. And then the pandemic hit, and I was alone with my daughter, who was in 5th grade when we got sent home from school. And so I was feeling a lot of anxiety and fear and things that I needed to work through. And photography has always been a way for me to deal with that. So I felt like I need to photograph now, and now is the time to do these self-portraits that I had been thinking about doing. So in addition to that, I felt like my daughter, who was transitioning from elementary school to middle school, needed some ways to deal with her own feelings in that difficult transition. So I encouraged her to do it. She was interested. She doesn't love photography like I love photography, but I think that it is kind of a special time that we spend together. So it's been a great experience for us to do that. So we started this mother-daughter self-portrait project. We pick a day, and then that's the day that we're doing it together. I shoot my self-portrait, she shoots hers, but it's happening at the same time, the same day. And it's just a record of how we got through the pandemic together. So that's what this piece is from.
Hi, I'm Nikki Swift. I'm part of the Life Stories Project. And I was not prepared to talk today, and I blame Nick for that. See, I'm not supposed to talk. So I am a filmmaker and installation artist, and so I was asked to help with guiding the women who are on the film crew at Marysville Reformatory to tell the stories of the other women. And so I basically entered the project as just a guide, not necessarily an artist, but someone who could help the women learn to refine what they already knew, or if they didn't really know much about filmmaking, help guide them to learn a little bit more. And some of it was theoretical because we didn't always have access to cameras. I mean, imagine that things in the prison system are not easy to get. And so we talked a lot about stuff before we actually executed the use of the cameras. So I also guided them through making the interview a safe space. So how could they make the women who were interviewing and being interviewed feel comfortable while they were talking and while they were so some of them came up with, like, one of the women was very anxious and can't sit still, and so they gave her a stress ball, and they were very comforting and for some of the really difficult stories. And so it was a lot about adaptation and growing through the situation. I'm echoing over here, so I can't think. So anything, Annette, would you like to step in and say anything? Yeah, I know.
Just eternally grateful to have been a part of it. So thanks, Nikki.
Is this, can you guys hear me? All right, that's good. So, yeah, I think most of these people did some really interesting stuff. All I did is I just did 2 pictures in the corner. They were, I just pointed out just right there. Uh, and it's just a picture of a dead squirrel I saw outside my house, and it was all inside out, and I didn't know how it got that way. So naturally, I took a picture, and I don't have much background. I bachelor's degree in fine art, whatever. I draw a lot. So, as a matter of course, I just composed it top to bottom. And yeah, after I took the picture, I thought it looked good. I saw there were some weeds above it and all that stuff. And I reckoned it was something like Michelangelo or something like that. But uh, yeah, and then I went ahead and I decided that I'd go ahead and start working on it. And that's usually when I start to think about like why I'm doing something or something like that. Like, uh, I think most people, they usually kind of plan it or something like that. I don't know. But usually I'm kind of like in the process of working on it. And yeah, one of the things I was doing, uh, perhaps because I'm morbid or something like that, I was watching the sun or whatever, watching the Russians get blown up and stuff like that. And I was just like sitting there like, man, that guy's over just like that squirrel. And it's just like a constant thing. It just keeps going on, doesn't stop. So I keep working on it. And the process that I wound up using is in order to get the image, I just printed the thing on some cookie paper. I have a HP laser printer. It's got iron oxide toner. And I got those alumina sheets just off the internet, Amazon. It was a impulse buy. And oh, that's the other thing. I do ceramics. So that I just picked up at random. I wound up learning it from a guy, Kevin Russell. I don't know if anybody knows him, but he's pretty good. He teaches over at I'm missing the name of it. That he teaches at the high school outside of Meyer, over on Hilliard Rome. But yeah, so that was the thing. I only got a small kiln. So if I would have had a larger kiln, it would have been more impressive. But yeah, so what I did is I took a piece, the alumina sheet, and I just transferred the image onto that. And then I took a pen, like a dress pen, and the line work on there I just drew on with the dress pen, and it oxidized during the firing process. We fired it to cone 5, it was about 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit, and uh, and that worked pretty good. I thought it was neat, and I accidentally printed a picture of my fiance on the back as a test. I used the wrong piece, and it actually looks good, pretty good if you light it from behind. I don't know. It's just weird looking. So then I decided I'd do something a little more familiar with the one that's in the frame, which is just cone 5 porcelain. And yeah, I just did a transfer on that. And one of the things I might suggest to you young folks is that if you start out on a project, it doesn't look right to you the first time around, it's okay to work on it for a few more months and do like at least 10 versions, and then have somebody come into the room and look at it with you. Because that's kind of what happened. Because I actually have 20 or 30 of those things, and I just picked the 2 that looked all right. But yeah, but that's basically it. It just looked like some kind of oh, mortuary type thing or something like that, Um, I thought it was beautiful in a sense. And yeah, hope it turned out all right for you guys. But yeah, that's me.
CG's a late comer, so we want to get caught up. Your name and a little bit about your process.
Sure. Hi. My name is CG Ryan. It's short for a name you can't pronounce. So CG also stands for Create Good. I'm interested in the nature of perception and reality and how we each live in a world that we create ourselves. And my medium is collage, and I work in augmented reality, virtual reality, and also video performance. My piece is in the back. It is a 12 portal augmented reality sculpture, and I've been working on it for about 2 years. And the pandemic absolutely changed my art because I first created 3 virtual reality poems that people would put on headsets, Oculus headsets, and see the world from 3 different points of view. But when I was graduating with my MFA, unfortunately, it was 2020. And so my thesis show was canceled, and no one would put on headsets and share them in public. So instead of giving up, I transformed my art into augmented reality, where people could look at it themselves on their own phone or a tablet, so that way it would work with the restrictions that we had. And my piece is, it was shot all over actually the world, Suma Beach, Death Valley, Ohio, Europe. And it all combines things to show that it really doesn't matter where you're from, that we all live in a world of our own making, and we're all interrelated. And that's it.
Thank you. That's actually the perfect segue, because the next question I was going to ask is, how does your access to resources and maybe even the pandemic and your experiences affect the way that you create art? So that's the perfect segue for the next section. These students, your bell's going to ring in a little bit and you're going to head out. Does anybody have a quick question before you go? Oh, 2. That's it, right? Thank you all so much. Now we have the tour from Cincinnati is here. So we'll go ahead and go back down the line, if you don't mind picking that up, about the pandemic, or maybe even resources and access to things and how that affects what you create. I'll do this again.
Oh, can you hear me? Welcome. There it is. Welcome to the Shot Tower Gallery, Image Ohio exhibition of Roy G. Biv Gallery as partnership with the Shot Tower Gallery. We are a arts high school and career center that in 1979 renovated this building, which is from the Civil War from 1864. And they decided that when a very creative director, Jack Gibbs, decided along with the first gallery director, that if we were going to have an arts high school, arts school, career center, they had to understand the excellence of artists. And so they decided at that time in 1979, there was not a lot of spaces for artists to show. Very limited art galleries that artists can exhibit in. We had the museum show. I was part of the Ohio Art League at the time, and we were always struggling to find exhibition space. So in '79, they created this gallery. And so we started working with Roy G. Biv Gallery about 18 years ago, presenting ImageOhio. This is the 22nd year that they have had ImageOhio, which is a lens-based exhibition. And we have quite a few of the artists here today. And if you could just introduce yourself, and then I'll have Lynette ask you some questions. So everyone's from Cincinnati, coming up from Cincinnati for photo focus. So I'll just let you just say which your work is yours, and then your name, and then Lynette will ask you some questions.
Hello. Does this work? I don't. Oh. Hi, I'm C.G. Ryan, and I am a video collage artist. I work in augmented reality, virtual reality, and video performance. My piece is the 12 portal augmented reality sculpture, and you experience the augmented reality with your phone or a tablet.
All right, hello, thanks for coming. My name is Tracy Schotten. I am an expanded lens artist working in film and photography, glass object making and installation. And the piece I have in this show are called Encoded Aspects, and they are two silver gelatin print photograms, so cameraless images that are living over on the brick walls on the far side of the door behind you.
I'm Claudia Esslinger, and my work is the Snow Migrant, which is right back there, the two pieces that are kind of glowing in a box. If you stand in front of them, hopefully you can see that it appears to be moving, even though it is not.
Hi, I'm Ardeen Nelson. The work I have here is the two pieces on the brick wall back there from a body of work I've been exploring since COVID, really, called Transitory States. It has to do with the aging process.
Hi, my name is Kayla Holdgrave. I'm primarily a landscape photographer. I use traditional, some digital processes, alternative processes. My work is the large installation, the vinyl on the wall with the anthotypes on top.
Hi, my name is Michal Raisin. I am with the Life Stories Project, so all the way on the back end there. It's an oral histories project that got together, I think, 10 women serving lengthier life sentences at the Ohio Reformatory for Women. And I was part of a team, so I'm the humanities professor that trained them in oral histories and taught them how to interview each other. And this was very much about getting these stories through in their own voices as much as possible, because they've had really high profile cases that were really sensationalized in the media. And this project was very different. It was about giving them the platform and the opportunity to tell their own stories. So I'm not a visual artist. I worked with them on the words and the narrative part of it.
I'm Nikki Swift, and I was also part of the Life Stories project. I was the filmmaker, so I guided the prison had a filmmaking team, and I just guided them through telling the women's stories. So basically, we talked a lot about like how to create a safe space for the women, how to have the women mic each other in a situation where they can't necessarily mic each other. So asking permission before they put the mics on each other, making sure that the women interviewing each other and being interviewed felt comfortable. So what do they need to be comfortable in this situation? Do they need a break? Are they going to need something to comfort them while they're talking about their story? So I helped guide that process.
Hello, I'm Jason Routson, and I did the print that has the desiccated squirrel. But yeah, I guess I'm a graphic artist. I mostly draw, and I work in ceramics. It's a ceramic type print. It's a iron oxide toner. Printed on alumina, and then there's another one that's a kind of the same deal, but it's printed on porcelain. So, but, oh, okay. Oh, well, that's pretty simple. Compulsion. I'd probably be drawing no matter what it was available to me. As far as how the pandemic has affected things, well, strangely enough, in my case, since I work from home, I have more opportunity to draw while I'm in the office, as it were, and no managers to yell at me about it. And my productivity at work too has gone up by 60%. So yeah, so they should let me draw. But yeah, that's basically how it goes with me. Did you want?
I kind of started out right when the pandemic was starting. I was working at a school, and I said, I have all the equipment to live stream if we end up going into quarantine. And so we could have content that we could continue providing for the students if we go into quarantine. And they're like, nah, Nikki, that's not going to happen. And then a week later, they're like, were you serious about that? And so we created this whole live stream feed of artists talking to the students via live stream, giving them like how they were keeping creating, and we just kept creating this weekly, or almost I think it daily at one point. And that turned into other opportunities. Like then I met Nick from Wave, and we had to live stream a project called Bridges of Love. And then this came around. And so it created more opportunities for me, maybe not the opportunities I was working on at the time, but I was able to change and morph within the pandemic.
All right. Well, as someone who's not a working artist, I can really only speak to some of the challenges of the pandemic during our project. So obviously we had to wear masks when we finally were able to go in. There were a lot of kind of steps and hurdles until we were finally able to go and meet with the women in person. And they had some capacity for meeting on Zoom, but it feels like that never actually came together very much. So we had a lot of stumbling blocks. It's actually pretty amazing to see that it's all here. It all came together. We had some long breaks because every time someone would get sick, the whole cottage, which is where the women live, would go into quarantine. So we'd have breaks of 2 or 3 weeks where we couldn't even go in, come back again. 2 weeks later, there would be another quarantine. So yeah, we weathered some time. So we're really, really excited that this ended up working out and what you have here today.
So I decided to go to grad school right before the pandemic. So I was in the first year of my 3-year program when the pandemic happened. So I had about a semester of access to the facilities, and then it was an instant, like, complete shutdown, 24 hours, vacate your studio, get everything out. And then we spent a few months trying to figure out the best way for all the students to have access to the facility. So by the summer of 2020, we actually did have access to the facilities. It was very regimented, but we were still able to have that access and use those facilities. So I was able to print in the darkroom, be in my studio, but it definitely shifted the way I thought about making work, because I am a very much of a traditional photographer and using traditional processes, but I really had to kind of be a little more innovative with it and think more digitally, because I was working from my home studio most of the time. So I'd have to shoot a lot of film, but I was mainly shooting black and white because I was able to process that at home and then scan it in and then kind of work with it digitally and print it digitally. So that's, you know, what I enjoy about the times, is that we can work both traditional and digitally with photography and with images. But yeah, definitely, you know, continues to shift my practice.
For me, I'm retired, taught for a very long time, and I have all my own facility at home, digital lab, wet darkroom, large format printer, digital 100 megapixel camera, lighting, all that stuff. So I was in great shape. I could do anything I wanted, except what I was photographing was closed down because of the pandemic. So I kind of turned to one of my favorite things is plants and flowers. And that's how that series came about.
Well, that was such a fraught time, right, for everybody. And my experience, I'm sure, is varied, like yours probably is, but things like my daughter's family had to come live with us because they lost their job. And so I had grandchildren running around, and that kind of saps the work time a little bit, but I love being with them. And often they are models, so all that's good. And also, since I'm a faculty member, I could go whenever I wanted to use the facility, so that wasn't a problem. But the in-between times when I was teaching, and we were hybrid teaching, was really awful. It's hard to teach something that requires showing someone or being physically there. So you can do slideshows, you can do videos, you can do all kinds of things, but actually showing is very, very difficult. And so, as an example, one class I was teaching when the pandemic started was stop motion. And I had students go home with a certain amount of knowledge. I'd given the basics, but of course they didn't have the equipment. And so they were doing things like using office chairs instead of tripods. And that just doesn't work with stop motion. So there were challenges. Luckily, I didn't add the wonderful part was that I had a kind of a start and stop sabbatical going on during that time. And so there were some periods of that time that were pure work time.
I think for me, I had been making a lot of large scale installations. And of course, that was kind of came to a close. And I found myself, even though I sometimes make video in my home apartment at that time, but I think I've started writing a lot more and sort of going on walks in like outdoor parks. And I found a lot of that was really nourishing for my practice and thinking. And I think some of the sentiments and things I try to think about through my visual work, I then was communicating through language. I am now in my second year in my MFA program, and having access to those resources now, such as the dark room, such as the glass studio, has been really generative and really encouraged a more process-oriented approach to my practice. So translating one material into another, making something and then taking it into the dark room, and just really everything kind of fueling everything else. And that's been a really exciting time that I'm having right now.
The pandemic hit for me when I was in my last semester of my MFA program. And I was working on an augmented reality and virtual reality installation that depended on people coming into a geodesic dome and putting on virtual reality headsets. And when the pandemic came in, I had the installation all, set and everything, but now people couldn't actually see it. And so one of the things, I feel very fortunate because of my medium that I can do it pretty much anywhere as far as video collage. So actually from my oral defense of my thesis, I ended up using some experimental trial footage samples and crits videos, and I put them all together. And I did a collage as if it really existed and superimposed people looking at art and everything. And even at the end, added applause. So when I showed it to my thesis committee, it was as if the thing had actually existed with people. And that's the thing I love about my medium, is that basically I can create entire worlds and it doesn't matter where I am. So I feel really lucky. Well, I was so excited that my augmented reality's 12 portals hanging sculpture was accepted into the show because it was my most complicated piece. It had taken me 2 years to work on. And when I came into the space, honestly, I've showed it at 2 other venues and galleries, and it's never looked better than in this space. So I felt very, very grateful for all the assistance also in setting up and hanging it. It was at the perfect place for people to look at all the 12 portals, walk completely around it, and experience the augmented reality. So I was very grateful.
Well, echo some of that. I think when I was dropping off my work here, it was my first time I had visited this gallery, and I was just totally stunned by this space and so excited to be able to share my work here. And I think in terms of these prints, I had initially made versions of these prints that were smaller, and then I scaled up, which was something I'd been intending to do. But then when you see them in a space like this, you're like, wow, they get dwarfed again. And I think it's really exciting to think about, to have these experiences of scale. And it really inspires me to work bigger and differently. And I think looking at the other work in the show, it's been really exciting for me to see how other folks are working with the space or are hanging in different, hanging their work and displaying their work in different ways. So that's all been really positive. Thank you.
Yeah, it is a great space, and I love the height of the ceiling. These two pieces are actually part of a larger installation, and so my original intent was to hang them, and knowing that I had been in the show once before, so I kind of knew the space, and I thought I think it'd be better on the wall directly, just in terms of I don't know, accessibility. It needs to be close to somebody, etc. And I think it worked fine. And it's near an outlet. That's a good thing.
I've had the opportunity to display work here before, and so I was very familiar with the space. I was really happy to end up over on the brick, which is an interesting way instead of a white environment.
I've also showed work in this space before. So when I applied, I had mocked up to have my piece specifically on that movable wall. But that piece is from my thesis show that I had in the spring. And in that gallery, it's a lot smaller. And I had it just, flat on the single wall with other images. So to have it on a movable wall, just as its like own entity, its own piece, definitely just feels a lot different and a lot bigger. So I like to see different iterations of this piece.
And we should share that Kayla is actually, her work was awarded Best of Show this year by our jurors. So yes, congratulations for that. But it is very impactful in that space. Absolutely. Yes.
So this is the third time that Life Stories has been on exhibit, and it's very interesting to see how it moves from one space to another because it's changed quite a bit. It showed at Columbus Arts Fest in a small tent, so it was just a tiny preview. Then it showed at Wild Goose Creative in Franklinton, which is a small gallery. And here is completely different. It has so much space to breathe. And I encourage you all, when you go and look at it, there's a small room in the back where we were able to set up. The warden very generously gave us one of the cots from one of their cells. And I'm not going to influence your experience of it, but I have to say for me, that was an addition to the exhibit that was very impactful. And so it keeps having these afterlives, and it's a really interesting process to watch. For us too, the question of curating this exhibit is a really important one, because when we set out to do this project, a lot of it was, how do we let these women tell their own stories in their own voices? And the minute you start curating, you're already introducing a perspective. So we've been very mindful as we've gone from one space to another. How can we let it breathe? How can we minimize noise around these videos? And this is an absolutely incredible space for that. I think it gives it a lot of breathing room.
And that installation space includes the shoe project. I'm not sure what the actual name of that project was, but where the women were given a variety of shoes, and you would select one for yourself and express yourself through embellishment of the shoe. So that's another aspect in that space as well. Thank you.
I mean, like Mikhail said, I've seen it in 3 different iterations. My husband and I helped Nick design the layout for the monitors. And so I've seen it like in the back of the Wave headquarters, like in various different iterations. And so seeing it here is kind of an extension of everything in a way, because I pictured it being able to move and changing and morphing. And ooh, I'm not sure how to say this. I'm kind of excited to see each time it is installed and each time it changes. I mean, the shoe stories were there with Wild Goose with it. But this kind of gives it its own space, but brings it out onto the floor in a nice way that like makes it its own, but an extension of the whole show. Um,
Yeah, I didn't expect to get in and I didn't have any preconceptions or anything, but yeah, um, I actually like the gallery space. Uh, wasn't expecting Doric columns here, and I do like how they do the wood and just like the overall. It's like got a cross between like gymnasium, gallery, and like austere. So uh I don't know if my work fits in it, but yeah, it's a good space. I like it. But oh, I'm sorry.
Is close by somewhere. Larry and Cynthia Collins, that's on your bus, and some of you know them, I'm sure. Larry Collins, who taught at CCAD, their daughter went to school here, filled the entire gallery with his work, which is a big feat and beautiful show. And our dean has had a two-person show here, and I think maybe Larry had 70 works, maybe. Beautiful retrospective, and our dean's exhibit was as well. So I wanted to mention that about Larry's work being here since you're on the bus with him. So I think at this point, it would be nice for you guys to have some time to walk around, and the artists are here if you have any questions for them. Thank you for being here. We love that you're here.
Thank you all very much for your time and attention and sharing. We appreciate that very much. Oh, did she? Was it Aaron, my intern?